All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Build Your Village interview series. I'm really excited today to bring you this conversation with a heart-driven business owner raising kids and consciousness. My guest today is Sarah Beale, and she is a wife, mother, writer, and entrepreneur with a penchant for talking to birds and collecting stones. As an unschooling traveling mom, she's an observer of human nature and, in particular, how this relates to her four unschooled children. She believes that wildness, is not only all around us, but also within, and unleashing it is the key to healing, peace, and living on in our purpose. She's a regular contributor to books that speak to her soul and unschooling mentor. She's about to launch a podcast called Uncontrollable Anarchy in the Modern Family. And you can find Sarah across social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. She's at The Renegade Mum, and I'll leave links in the description so you can find her there at therenegademum.com. That's M-U-M, mum. And you can also find her at partnershipparent.com. So I'll have all that in the description for you. All right, everyone, I'm excited to bring you Sarah Beale. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. So nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to also highlight that Sarah is part of a book that we're launching together, Raising Wild Ones. And so she's kicking off this interview series with the Raising Wild Ones contributing authors. And that was a huge bringing together of all collective ideas of what Raising Wild Ones looks like. And so I'm really excited to highlight that our book is actually coming out when this is being recorded the next day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
exciting. And how I like to get into this conversation is first to just lay the lay of the land, like kind of get a sense of what being a mom looks like for you. Just currently, what's your kid situation? I know you said you have 4 kids, but if you want to tell us their ages or what it's like, the dynamic, where you're living, give us a sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I have got 14, 12, 10, and 8-year-olds. And this is a good time to ask me that question because I always remember how old they all are when they're like evenly spaced because of where their birthdays fall. Sometimes it's like I have to remember how old they are. But right now it's like 2 years apart, 2, 4, 6, 8, easy. And we've got a 2-year-old border collie as well, that my children actually kind of feel is like a human baby. But I have to admit that I don't feel quite so deeply connected to him as I do my human babies. And we are away from our home country. So we're from Australia. We left our home country 3 years ago. What is it? August. Yeah, 3 years and 3 months ago for travel and adventure. Not really anticipating that the adventure wouldn't be quite what we had in our head when we left. Of course, life never is. And so we've been in England for the last 2 years, basically in the same spot, right in the middle of the country, handily called the Midlands. So you always remember that you are in the middle, a really long way away from the beach. And we're actually about to leave here for further north. And then who knows, early next year, we'll be going somewhere different. We don't know yet. We have to convene as a family and work out what the next steps are. And that sums up really how our families always talking about what we're going to do next, what the next steps are, how everybody can be heard. Everyone has opinions. And really that's what Raising Wild Ones is kind of about in our family, giving space for everybody's thoughts and opinions. And there's a lot of them. Emotions, thoughts, opinions in our family. Yeah.
That's amazing. You just are going to choose a place that you guys all agree to, and that's going to or feel will be the best fit for your family.
I mean, that's a very simplistic way of describing what will potentially be a conversation that goes for months. And I can't say that we always manage to please everybody in the moment. My husband and I sometimes joke that we can't make everybody happy on the same day. So like someone gets today and someone else might get tomorrow, and then every now and again everyone's happy at the same time, and it's like amazing and we all notice it. So it's going to be more like, what's everybody think the next year is going to look like, and let's kind of shape out the next year. And probably we navigate things quite differently in our family to how most other families dialogue about big decisions, because they are all such strong personalities, as all children are actually. It's just that mine have been raised to be heard.
I see. Yes. So do you want to share just a little bit what that looks like? I'm curious if there's a story with that, with how they.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stories. I remember when a lot of them have to do with my first, because I guess she was the first. I remember when she was like around 2, and we got in the car to go somewhere. So, you know, when you've got a small child, I mean, they're a baby, you put them in the car, you go somewhere, you're not really telling them where you're going because, you know, they don't care, they're not listening, whatever, they're in their dream world. And then maybe they get to 1 and they kind of toddle from the house to the car. Maybe they pick a flower, maybe they look at a caterpillar, maybe they like look at the sky, maybe they might say bird or something, you know, and then you put them in the car and you drive off. And then one day when she was around 2, and she was very verbal at that age, she said, "Where are we going?" And I remember thinking, shit, I have to explain stuff now and get consent, which I didn't realize. It took me a while to realize that that was what was going on. She wasn't really just asking where we were going, but she was really demanding buy-in. And like from that age, and I think I had a second child by then, who thankfully wasn't yet verbal, so I just had one to contend with for a bit longer, that it wasn't anymore just like, oh, this is what I want to do, and so this is what we're going to do. It was like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Or like we'd get somewhere and like, I don't want to be here. And she would make that very clear. All the ideas I had for what my life would look like were challenged by this 2-year-old that had a very strong opinion about what she wanted to do and what she didn't want to do. And I guess that was the first time that I realized that was something that I would have to navigate. I think I did assume that I would just like put them all in the car and they would just tag along to all the stuff that I had in my head that we would do. And that did not happen.
So I want to ask, Sarah, were you like that growing up? Were you someone who had to know and be contented with, or were you more just go with the flow? What were you like?
Well, I was go with the flow. And it is partly my personality actually, but it's also because I certainly wasn't consulted. Like we just did do what we were told, you know, like in that very conventional like way of like the parents just decided what we were doing and we just did have to go along with it. We weren't really given an opportunity to disagree or have our own ideas. I mean, my parents might not agree that that's the case, but you know, that's my recollection. And so I think I just assumed that that's what parents did. So my children are all very different. That particular child, my oldest, does really like to know ahead of time what's happening. And we now know she likes to know the ins and outs of everything before she decides whether she's going to participate or not. But even though the others aren't all exactly like that, they do all have, or they all demand to have a say in what we do. And very much it's consent-based, which isn't always easy for sure, because there's 4 of them and sometimes one will want to do something and nobody else will, or like 2 will want to do something and 2 won't. They're all getting older.
Yeah.
So some of them can stay home. But, you know, when they were younger, that was quite tricky because one of them, you know, wanted to do horse riding lessons, but the others didn't, but I had to take them all with me. So how did we navigate that when they didn't all want to go? And we're quite clear about that. Yeah.
And what advice would you give to a mom who has, you know, multiple kids and is working through that? Like what is, I want to know from you, because I know we all have our different approaches, right? And ways we might see how it should be done, but I think it's important to hear a perspective of how you've navigated that, how you've actually figured that out, and maybe you're still figuring it out in some ways because it evolves as they evolve, right? But
yeah. Well, I mean, very with flexibility,
mhm.
with like, so my kids don't go to school, and that's relevant because we don't have to stick to a schedule. We don't have to stick to anybody's schedule. So even we don't do so many classes and things now because the kids don't want to, but when we were in Australia, there was a few things that they did want to do. So, you know, once or twice a week, we might have to be somewhere by a particular time. So we would have to make sure that we left plenty of time to negotiate what that was going to look like. And maybe it was that one of the kids wanted to bring their computer so they could play Minecraft in the car, or maybe it's that my youngest wanted to take like bags and bags full of stuff to play with, or someone wanted to call past a particular cafe on the way to get a hot chocolate or whatever. So always allowing for that. But we really haven't had to rush a lot, and that's a good thing for our family, because sometimes these like negotiations, they really are, can take a long time. Like, instead of just saying, oh, hey guys, this is what we're going to do today, it's more like, hey guys, in 2 days' time, do you want to do this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, one of my children just recently has said he would like 3 days notice before we do anything, particularly if it's something that he doesn't really want to do. So I have to go, oh, okay, it's Thursday. Hey, and he's actually now, he said that that's what he needs, and we're able to honor it most of the time. And he's actually saying, oh, okay, sure.
That's beautiful. That's so great
Yeah,
to he
yeah. Well,
knows how to ask for what he wants and
yeah,
work in that family dynamic. It's like here's
yeah,
what you need to be okay in
yeah,
the family.
yeah.
I love that.
But it has meant that the work around expectations,
Mhm.
because parents like have a lot of them, right? Like we all, I would say, I don't think I've ever met a mum who in pregnancy didn't have this idea of what she thought it was going to be like. Even if we can't quite articulate it, it's like, oh, I'm pregnant. And you sort of can't imagine being a mum before you've actually got the baby, but we've still got this vision of like, maybe it's that like our daughter's going to wear cute dresses and they're going to have bows in their hair and they're going to like doing craft, and maybe they're going to do baking with them, like, you know, all these things. And maybe some of it's memories from our own childhood, maybe some of it's from books, maybe some of it's from seeing what other parents are doing. And when your children are born and they are not doing those things, you have to completely reassess these like attachments to how we thought things were going to be. Because if you hold tight to those ideas that we think are ideals, and then we're constantly fighting to put those things in practice, then we suffer.
Uh-huh.
That's not what I thought this was going to be. I thought I was going to have this like cute little child that trots along next to me and just like agrees with me and just is super like just does everything that I want to do. And that's most of the time that's not actually how it happens. And yeah, so you know, I guess that's been my work, like letting go of those things that I thought were hallmarks of being like a good mum and having a good child, because we love to like take credit when our kids are like good. And we're less inclined to want to take credit when they're doing something that isn't what we expected.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of parents that suffer because they like hold on to these ideas for a very, very long time. And it's not what their children want or are capable of, because their children are not them.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's actually something I explored in my chapter as well, is the resistance we have around, even if it's somewhat unconscious, right? Just yeah, this expectation you don't even question. It should be this way, and
Yeah.
then you have to reassess it because we always get kids who come into our life to help us expand and grow. I don't think any kid comes
Yes.
into our life to keep us the same. So, you know, that.
No, why like why
Go
no,
ahead.
like why would we want to stay the same? Except we do think we want to stay the same.
Hmm.
And it's like oh, I'm a bit bored, so maybe I'll have a baby. Like, I'm ready to have a baby. I feel like that's the next thing to do, whatever. I don't think anyone decides that consciously that they want to have a baby because they're ready for like this amazing transformation or the complete pulling apart of you, like the complete like breaking apart of who you thought you were to become something completely different. No one signs up for that. God, you wouldn't actually do it, would you? If you thought that that's what motherhood was going to be, you'd be like, no, no, you.
There must be something twisted about me then, because that was actually why I decided I
Oh,
had to have a kid, was because I
oh
knew
my God.
I would not grow into the person I needed to be unless I had a kid. And it felt selfish. It actually felt like I was doing it for an ego related thing, but I knew it. I didn't expect it to be as breaking open of everything, but you get, what you ask for, you receive tenfold. So,
Well, I didn't ask for it, so that seems very unfair. Well, that's amazing. You must have been ahead of the curve. I can't honestly, I really don't know that I would have chosen it if I'd known, like honestly, because I couldn't have understood. I couldn't have understood. Yeah, and I guess it seems a little bit almost arrogant in a way to kind of say that the kind of like growth and transformation, and you obviously are talking a lot about raising consciousness, and I know that there's other ways to do that, not just through having children, but the way this happens for mothers through having children is like nothing else. So I guess there must have just been something in you that actually recognized that.
hmm yeah. And if I'm curious, how old you were when you started the journey of becoming a mom? Like sometimes that's interesting to know how young or old someone was. I don't know, just what the age
Yeah.
was.
Well, I was 31 when I had my first child, but I was 25 when I first started trying to get pregnant.
Uh,
And so that was quite a few years. So I think, and we ended up using fertility treatment to conceive our first two children,
mhm,
like really invasive. And maybe that almost took over.
mm,
Like maybe my experience would have been different. Maybe I would have this like very medicalized process for quite a long time in order to get pregnant. I don't know. I mean, that's just part of my journey, and I don't have any regrets about that. But yeah, certainly it was all consuming in a different way because
Interesting.
that was a long time. Like 25 to 31 is quite a few years of like change anyway. While I was on this journey to becoming a mum,
Yeah.
yeah, but from like I'm 45 now and I've got a nearly 15-year-old, and like I don't even think I resemble who I was when I was 31.
Mhm.
Like I had no idea what was in store for me.
Wow. That's that's what I want to explore a little bit more with you too, is this idea that, as a mother, we go through these intense challenges having our kids, right? There's things that we're just faced with, and you mentioned some of them, like with the dynamic of buy-in and consent and all that. But have you noticed in yourself past like ways you were raised? Sometimes you could call it triggers, some traumas, different levels of traumas that you had to become aware of so that you didn't continue them
Mm-hmm.
in your family patterning, or like what level of consciousness did you have going in of like, okay, I want to
Mm-hmm.
do things differently, or did it just sort of happen, and what did that look like for you, like as you became a mom?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is like that comes up every day. It's what I do in work. It's what I do with supporting other parents. It's what consumes my thinking.
Mm,
Um, and we talk to our kids about it, and my husband and I have conversations about it, and yes, it's everything, the openness to that, anyway, the openness to the gift that is that questioning of these generational patterns, traumas, triggers, hurts, wounds, whatever you want to call them. I did have some awareness that I didn't want to do things the same as my parents, and my husband did too. So we did talk about some of those things before we had kids, like, we didn't want to smack our kids, like the obvious stuff. But until I had actually probably my third child. I always attribute my third child to this like next level of like awakening to my mother's instinct, my mothering instinct that really was dormant until he was born. I didn't know what was really like shoved down in there, like packed in pretty tight. And it was that third child that, I mean, his birth was very, very primal. His birth was like really fast, and it was like in my shower. There was a lot of like blood, not like a ridiculous, it wasn't like a violent birth, but like it sort of was like the precursor to how things would be for a bit with him. So actually the way he was born was like very, very, I should have known, like very fitting. The first two were like so calm and beautiful in the water. It was like dark and like so peaceful. And this baby, the third one, he was like, there was no time for the birth pool. My midwife just managed to get there. It was like fast, furious. I knew he was distressed, which I just instinctively knew. And then he was born not breathing, and took a little minute. My midwife actually had to suck meconium out of his windpipe to get him to breathe. And maybe if the circumstances of his birth were a bit different, the outcome would have been different. So it was like all these things that were like, oh, this baby's here for something different to the other two. And it was that one that really made me go, oh, this is motherhood. It was like this baptism of fire, which for some people probably happens on their first, but I was a bit of a slow learner. I really needed to have that third. And then the fourth was like another
level.
Another level again. But like that third baby was like, he wouldn't be put down. He wouldn't have anyone but me. He needed to be with me all the time. All normal, but like not like my first two, because I was still fighting motherhood for my first two. I still somehow managed to like have the house clean, iron shirts, make jam, all that. Like it just wasn't full out chaos yet. That third one really, like, I just had to give in to everything. I had to just surrender fully to everything that my kids needed. He was 20 months younger than my second, so I had 3 children like really close together, so that was it was really full on anyway. And that was kind of what I would attribute my like the cork came out the bottle. And then everything just like all of these things from my childhood started coming back.
Okay.
Nothing super traumatic, like when you people's stories, but just like normal things that were normal in the 70s, like leaving your baby to cry in the cot, not picking them up very much, being, like just encouraging detachment. And that stuff that I hadn't really picked up on until this baby like really needed full attachment. And that was really triggering until I realized what was going on. And that's when I really started to develop a practice of doing something with those feelings, knowing I needed to actually do something with those feelings.
Yes, I want to ask you, like, okay, so going into that, I know you have a whole toolbox and you do a lot of work with people around all this. So yeah, tell me about a little bit, if you can give people like a glimpse of that process, what would be something they could start to consider with owning the feeling, how you did it.
Yeah. The first thing I think I realized, and this is still something that comes up for me like daily, but I've just got heaps quicker at doing it, is recognizing where things that we've been told are not true. So a lot of the parenting practices, and therefore our response to things, are born out of other people's stories, knowledge that's been given to us by our parents, by our next door neighbor, by someone on telly, whatever. For example, here's a big one. Babies need to sleep on their own. Babies need to sleep 12 hours a night. Babies have to sleep without a grown-up. Babies have to learn how to sleep on their own. That's what I believe. That's what I've been told. And when you have an idea in your head, and you don't have a reason to question it, then you get busy at pulling in all of the evidence to support what you think. So I had a belief handed down to me from my mum, reinforced by everything in society around babies and sleep. I believed it to be true because I didn't have a reason not to. And so I got busy pulling in all of the evidence, all of the information that said, yeah, that's true, until I was convinced it was true, that babies needed to sleep, you know, in certain blocks of time. They need to learn how to sleep in their cot. They, you know, whatever. And then this third baby was not like that. And I realized that that was a complete crock of shit. So like all these other things we're told about children are also not true. That was the first big lie, I guess, that I really got conscious about, because he did not sleep anywhere but me. He demanded to be on me all the time. And he was so freaking happy. And it's like, hang on, this doesn't seem right then, that like they need to be put down to sleep. They need to feed at certain times to be happy and to be thriving. And this child was not doing that. And he was happy and he was thriving. And actually, so was I once I surrendered. And so I started to kind of imagine every single truth that I thought about children. I just like started to reverse it almost. Like, oh, what if that's not true? Oh, what if that's not true? Everything that you hear about babies, you know, like, oh God, yeah. But just so many things, just even the way they learn, the way they, you know, yeah, the way they live in their instinct, you know, the way we're told that they need to be taught all this stuff and they don't. And I started to notice that if I was observant of my children, and that's actually something that I think I probably did get from, you know, my mum and other generations too, not interfering with our kids, like, and watching them, like actually watching them without constantly having to go and help them. And I started, didn't really need as much from me as I thought. They need to have, like, so how that relates to the sleep, like they need this environment, right, that we provide them where they know they're loved unconditionally, and that's kind of all they need mostly. And I'm not talking about like ignoring their needs. I'm talking about this kind of connection and attachment where we are always around for them when they need us, but they don't always need us to like hold their spoon or put their shoes on or, you know, whatever. But the sleep thing was the first thing that made me go, oh, hang on, what if like pretty much everything we've been told about babies and kids is actually not true, which is really what I ended up discovering.
So did you go down kind of a like researching it or just learning it and kind of trial and error with yourself around it? What did it look like for you with?
I guess I started to, I wouldn't say I'm a great researcher actually, because my attention my attention isn't like always held for that long. I kind of get an idea and then I just run with it. But I did read. Yeah, I read things that appealed to me, like one of my favorite books that I recommend to all parents is The Continuum Concept. And that is something of an anthropological study, actually, of a tribe in the Amazon. Have you heard of the book? Have you read the book? Yeah.
I have not read the book, but I read some of the journals, like the articles around the studies. Yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah, it's actually, it's kind of the, it's really come to be what I guess modern day attachment parenting is based around philosophically. So this idea that children need a strong connection with their caregivers, and that forms the foundation for everything. And, you know, and that feeds into this idea of community as well, right? Because our children ideally need more than just like the parents, but early on they form attachments with only a small number of people, and that forms everything about their world. And from there, they move out and they learn how to instinctively assess risk And so there's this story in the book, for example, of all the observations of the writer who lives with this tribe, of there being like a pit somewhere in their village, and how the children navigate this pit. I think it's a pit. Is it a pit or is it a fire? I think it's a pit. I should reread the book. It's been a while. In like modern Western world, people are like constantly telling their kids, they'd be saying, oh, although they probably build a fence around the pit, and there'd be signs and there'd be tape and they'd be like, you can't go near the pit. An assumption that kids are a bit stupid. But actually my own experience watching my kids is that they actually learn where their bodies are, how their body relates to everything else, and they've got such a strong sense of self naturally that drives their ability to assess risk without us really even saying anything. So like if a child is raised, it is really different. There's a distinction. If a child is raised constantly being told what to do and what not to do, I have noticed that some of those children have this malformed ability to assess risk. You know, so the kids who like run out in front of cars and stuff like that. I mean, I've never really seen a kid run out in front of a car, but I think parents imagine they're going to. Those children tend to be the ones that are constantly managed by their parents. In the unschooling world that we inhabit and have done for a long time, children are like more free range, right? That's a term that's used a lot nowadays, free range. Mm-hmm. And they work out their environment and they work out their body in relation to the environment. And they like climb high things and, you know, like climb rocks and don't wear shoes and walk across streams and use knives and navigate relationships and can walk without holding your hand and running out in front of cars. They've got mastery in a different way, and it's not because their parents are neglecting them, although that's the story, right? Parents aren't constantly interfering with their kids and neglectful, but these kids actually learn how to master life in a different way because they're accessing their like inbuilt risk assessment system. And I've seen that in my kids, all of them, and other people's children as well.
Yeah, I feel like what you're talking about is that innate, intuitive ability we all have to some degree that gets either expanded or squashed as we're raised, right? It's like even I've noticed that with how we like to kind of navigate our kids' dynamic of, you know, finish your food or eat that, don't eat that. And, you know, I coming from a real sensitivity myself with food and being a nutritionist, like I learned that some people actually don't eat food because there's a real reason they don't want to eat that. Actually, I'm just remembering a post you made recently about, is it tortellini?
Yeah.
And how like your son knew not to eat the tortellini. Was that right?
I mean, the other two seem to not know that and they ate the tortellini, but that's exactly right.
Yeah. But I think there's that honoring of, okay, I may not know everything that's best for you, and you may have some internal awareness how to learn something that by me telling you to do or not to do is actually interfering with that whole growth process. Like, and it seems so minor in moments, right? Like, step or, you know, look out for that. Like they're so little, but they realize you're taking them out of their body awareness for navigating in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like so many moments in the day that could be these decision points. Like, do I say something about that, or do I just like allow their own connection to self to guide them? And sometimes it's only after, you know, like maybe one of the kids, I'm just trying to think of something, but like they just have this knowing that you cannot even, it's like a supernatural thing even, like I can't think of a better word, like they don't want to do something or they do want to do something and they're real adamant about it. And maybe you might be like, oh, man, that's so inconvenient. I don't know why you won't do that thing. And it could be a relationship too. It could be they've got a sense about another person. And when you actually just sit back and allow things to unfold, so often I'll go, oh, I get that now. Now I understand. And it could even be like they want to stay up until midnight or 1 a.m. and you're like, oh man, I don't know. And then they do. And then something amazing happens between midnight and 1 a.m. that wouldn't have happened if you'd made them go to bed, right? I mean, my kids love to stay up all night, right? So this is something we navigate quite a lot. But my youngest, who's 8, she's not ever stayed up all night. But just lately, she's staying up much later. And as she's able to kind of navigate stuff by herself, she can, right? She doesn't need us so much. And there's been nights where she's wanted to stay up and see how late she can stay up. And she'll go and snuggle in bed with one of her brothers and like watch a TV show that they love to watch together. And he loves sharing things that he's passionate about with people that he loves. So then they get to spend this time together watching a TV show, and they're both so happy. And then they talk about it like just throughout the day. And if I was like adamant about making her go to bed, well, those moments wouldn't have happened. Just about like being tuned in.
I just got
not only to your kids, but to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is tricky because there's a lot of like, people often hear what I'm saying, and I've been doing this stuff for quite a long time. So like, say someone watches this and they're like, right, as of tomorrow, my kids don't have to go to bed, and they haven't done the work. And I'm not saying don't do that. I mean, whatever, do it or don't do it. It's that, but like, there is a lot of work that goes on. There's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of like, oh, my husband and I might be like, oh, should we do this or should we, what? And talking to the kids, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What's that going to look like? How's that going to work? We talk all the time. And so nothing's really like accidental in a way, because there's all this work going on. But the deeper you go, and the more flow you find, so that these things do really become second nature, because actually there's a lot of like unlearning and then learning new stuff that has to happen, like a lot of breaking down the programming, like the bedtime stuff, right? Like the programming around kids need routine, kids need structure, kids need a certain amount of sleep, kids have to, we have to be awake during the day, and it's really unhealthy to be awake all night, all of the stuff that goes on. And you could apply that to like literally anything that people think about kids. And I have no idea whether those things could be true for another family, but there are opportunities to like lean into trusting our kids. And then what I've found is that my kids have actually taught me to trust myself, which I did not know how to do, because I was forced out of myself at a very young age, like most of us probably were, because somebody was telling me all the stuff I had to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. So you're getting your boot camp into sovereignty again, right? Like that's just beautiful. And a lot of what you're saying is just such an invitation to explore it. And like you're saying, we're all coming in with unique circumstances, unique children. So that navigation, what I'm hearing is like, it just comes from that exploration, having conversations, talking it out, not being so rigid in how you think it should look, right?
Yeah. I think as parents, we often think there's one right way. So you're presented with a decision point and you're like, oh, I've got to choose the right thing. There's no right thing. There's no one right thing. There's like 1,000 right things. You could choose 1,000 different things that could work out amazingly well. And maybe like going to bed at 10 o'clock works out amazingly well. Maybe it's like whatever. It doesn't really matter. But it's like, the more we try to find the one absolutely right thing, or when your kid, I don't know if you've navigated any issues around sleep, but I remember when my first one was like little, and I still had this idea that she had to sleep in a certain way, and oh my God, the investment of equipment, like night lights that glowed a certain color when the room was a certain temperature, because someone told me that like the best optimal temperature for sleeping was 20 degrees, whatever. I don't know if it's 20, maybe it's 22. I can't remember, but it's like, what is it?
I said Celsius, because in the US we use Fahrenheit, so that's why. But
yeah, that'd be probably quite cold, right?
Yeah, that's like.
And so this night light that I bought would glow a certain color. Well, if the night light went too cold or too hot, and my baby woke up, I would then be convinced that they woke up because it was too cold or too cold or too hot. So then I would need to employ the strategy around keeping the room the right temperature. Maybe that was I needed a heater. Maybe it was like she needed a special sleeping bag. She had a special sleeping bag, New Zealand merino wool. I can still remember it. Man, I needed her to sleep in that sleeping bag. So I thought there was one right way. And if I couldn't get that one right way, it would all fall apart. But then, of course, when it didn't in fact fall apart, I realized that there is not one right way. And I've stopped looking for it, I guess is the point. And that means that you can let go of attachments to how things should be. So, you know, the ideal that you have in your head about how your child's going to be and what mother you're going to be. Once you start realizing that that's a lie, and you can be any number of different kinds of mothers and your children can be fabulous no matter how they are, then you stop looking for the one right thing that's going to make everything amazing. And you can just go, oh, whatever's happening right now is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's realizing just the uniqueness. I keep wanting to come back to that, the uniqueness of that. And having been, you know, only having a single child, I don't get to see that as much, but it's interesting talking to people who have multiple kids, especially 3 or 4, right? And you really get to see just how unique each one needs to be supported or allowed to process in their own way. It's like one who loves to stay up late versus one who likes to sleep in. And how can that just be okay? Because there are different types of energies, literally, right? We like actually come in with those different types of energies where some people need to wear themselves out and then they can crash. Some people need to slow down like before they're really tired and actually like sleep before they get to that exhaustion. And it's just knowing that about yourself, I think, and that's just something as a parent you just have to observe. And there's tools you can use, like in the book we're doing, one of the authors does I guess you could call it a modality or a process called Body of 9, right? Identifying the different dynamics of people. And there's other ways too, I think, learning how your child is uniquely equipped. I love that. So I want to ask you, Sarah, can you share just off the top of your head, you mentioned a book, which I want to include that also in the description. She'll have to send me that name. But are there any other valuable resources, anything that you're just like, okay, I know there's not one thing. I know there's not like, this is the thing, but is there just something that, you know, maybe it is that book, or if there's another book or a resource that just helped you be the mom you want to be or navigate this dynamic?
Yeah, well, I can name drop all my favorite writers now. So very early on as well, we loved reading Alfie Cohen. And my husband actually he brought home an Alfie Cohen book one day, and we've since devoured quite a few of his books. So he's written books like Punished by Reward. So he challenges the idea of reward and punishment based parenting or punitive parenting.
Yeah.
And like he's one of the kind of proponents or advocates of like not constantly like praising your children, because that's actually the opposite but the same as punishment, for example. And that fit in very well with what I was noticing anyway about my kids. So I love anything by Alfie Cohen. I also love John Holt, who is one of the people in the 80s who was talking a lot about unschooling, and he kind of coined that term unschooling as almost the antidote to schooling. Some people call it self-directed education or natural learning. And he made a real art form out of observing children. He didn't have any children himself, actually, but he watched what children did naturally. And I guess I was probably already doing that, but the fact that there was this guy with like authority who has actually put a little bit of like science behind it, and he's very well regarded in the alternative education world. He's actually died now, but anything written by John Holt is amazing. But something like Frida Lentz, Peter Gray. Peter Gray is another one. I should just send you the list of all my like people
Please
that
do.
I like to
This is great. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they're all kind of saying the same thing, and that is children they've got this. Like, they've got it. They know what they're doing. And actually, like, I mean, sometimes they need help, right? Sometimes they need help and they'll ask for it. or they're for it without asking for it. They'll be distressed and they'll need us to come in some way to help them. But actually, far more than we think, they're actually cool, and they bounce around, and we always kind of think of like holding them in this like a balloon that's very like flexible and they kind of like bounce out and hit the walls and bounce over here and then bounce over there, and I'm just like holding them in this very flexible kind of globe type thing that's just got a lot of movement, and sometimes they might stuff up and then they bounce back in again, and most of the time they actually know exactly what they're doing because they are so tapped in to their instinct in a way that I can't even see it. I don't even know what's going on in there, but like they've got it, and they tell me mostly that they've got it.
Yeah, thank you for expressing that and how important that is to realize they are so autonomous and they can be trusted as full-on human beings that come into this world. I love that. I love the resources you share are so valuable. And I want to leave people with knowing what's the best way to get in touch with you. If someone's interested in connecting with you, how do you want people to reach out?
Yeah. Well, I'm very old-fashioned and mainly on Facebook. People keep trying to say it's not cool to be on Facebook anymore, but damn it, I like Facebook. I find it very easy. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I was a slow adopter for digital technology, and I've just got my head around Facebook now. So I'm like, so that's where I am most of the time. Yeah, you can email me. You can go to either of those two websites that you mentioned before, partnershipparent.com, which is actually a joint project with my friend Lainey Liberty, and she's kind of responsible for spearheading the world schooling movement. So we actually work together on mentoring and supporting parents in our coaching programs. So we're on that website, and then I'm the Renegade Mum as well, .com.
Awesome. Beautiful.
And on Instagram, I'm the Renegade Mum too. But yeah, I'm most active on Facebook.
Okay, awesome. Well, if you need any insights, support around unschooling and just navigating the wild experience of parenting, definitely reach out to Sarah Beale. She is a lighthouse of information and support. So, Sarah, is there any last final thoughts, anything you want to share just as a message to anyone listening?
That's a dangerous question, because these are my favorite things to talk about. I could go for days, but really what I like to tell people is it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Yeah, and it's not half so weighty as we think.
Great reminder.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Sarah Beale, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right, everyone. Until next time, take care.